You ever notice how he starts showing up again, not in grand gestures, but in these almost insignificant moments? A reaction to your story, a quick emoji, a random meme, a half thought out message like, hey, have you been? It looks casual, even harmless, but let me tell you something most people miss. That's not casual at all. That's calculated vulnerability. That's an avoidant man's version of screaming, I miss you, but without ever risking the pain of being rejected or fully seen. See, avoidant men don't fall in love like the movies taught you. They don't confess it over candlelight. They don't write long texts saying how much they think about you. No, when an avoidant starts falling, he doesn't open up, he circles you. He dances around you like a satellite around a planet, orbiting what he's afraid to crash into. But make no mistake, he's pulled by your gravity. Every just checking in is him trying to find safety in your emotional presence again. And here's where it gets deep. These small check-ins are not random. Psychologically, they're what we call testing behaviors. They're micro attempts to gauge your emotional availability without demanding anything from you. Because deep down, he doesn't trust that love won't betray him. He doesn't trust himself with intimacy, and he especially doesn't trust when he feels when you come into focus. You see, for the avoidant, love is both magnetic and terrifying. It represents closeness, but closeness is the very thing he was wired to run from. So instead of chasing, he peeks. He peeks into your world, hoping you'll pull him in, but not too far. He wants proximity without pressure, closeness without chaos. And when he sends that text, hope you're good, or drops a random comment on your post, he's not looking for attention. He's looking for emotional proof that he still matters, that the bridge isn't burned, that you're still there. Because deep down, he regrets pushing you away, but doesn't know how to say it. Now let's zoom out. Philosophically, this is a war between fear and longing. He longs to connect with you, but he fears the consequences of that connection. So he builds a strategy, a subtle one, where he stays just close enough to feel you, but far enough to protect himself. You're dealing with a man who's falling, but not freely. He's falling in reverse, backward, hesitant, clumsy. Because love, to him, means surrender. And surrender feels like death to the ego that spent a lifetime defending itself from pain. But here's what you must understand. When he starts doing this, these minimal, strange, out of nowhere interactions, he's not playing games, he's unraveling. That's what emotional conflict looks like in the avoidant brain. You've triggered something in him that's now bigger than his coping mechanisms. You're not just someone he dated, you've become an unresolved thread in his story. The thread that tugs every time silence gets too loud. So don't dismiss these signs. Don't underestimate their weight. In his world, that tiny message might have taken an hour of hesitation, a dozen drafts, and a war between pride and vulnerability. His way of falling may be quiet, but it is real. It's happening in the background of his life, in every scroll, every memory, every second guess. And if you're paying attention, you'll see it, not in what he says, but in what he tries to say and can't. When an avoidant man starts checking in, he's not trying to reconnect, he's trying to survive the feelings he told himself he'd buried. Now here's where it gets even more deceptive, and I want you to really listen to this part because this is where most people get confused and give up too soon. When an avoidant man starts falling, he doesn't walk toward you with open arms. He doesn't confess his feelings in some emotional outburst. He doesn't come back saying, I realize I love you. What does he do instead? He starts talking to you in the most neutral, logical, emotionally sanitized way possible. He starts telling you about work, about his gym routine, about what his friends said, about the podcast he listened to. And you're standing there thinking, what is this? Why is he here if he's not talking about us? But that right there, that's the sign. It's the crack in the wall. See, avoidants don't talk about emotions when they're overwhelmed by them. They talk around them. They intellectualize, rationalize, and distract from what they feel because that's how they've always protected themselves. Vulnerability feels like walking into a dark cave with no map. They'd rather build a scaffold around the cave than ever go inside it. So when he starts giving you information instead of intimacy, understand what's actually happening. He's trying to reconnect without reopening the wound. And it's not because he doesn't feel anything. It's because he feels too much. When an avoidant starts catching real feelings, the kind that disrupt his routine, that shake his sense of control, his brain kicks into defense mode. Emotions are dangerous to him. Love is a battlefield he never wanted to fight on. So instead of facing it head on, he tries to neutralize it. And how does he do that? By keeping things friendly, casual, light. Now here's the philosophical paradox of the avoidant man. He wants emotional safety, but he doesn't know how to create it. So he replaces intimacy with information. He tries to build a bridge back to you using conversation that's stripped of vulnerability. But what he's really doing is whispering behind the curtain, I miss you, but I'm terrified of the version of me I have to become to deserve you again. Let's break this down deeper. When he starts speaking logically, giving you data instead of emotion, it's because logic gives him control. Logic is safe. Emotions are unpredictable, and avoidants hate unpredictability in relationships. He'll talk about everything except how he feels because he's hoping you'll read between the lines without him having to say it out loud. But here's the twist, and this is where most people blow it. When you react by saying, why are you messaging me if you're not going to talk about us? Or you're just wasting my time, he shuts down again. Because in his mind, vulnerability just got punished. He tried in his own guarded way to reach out, and it backfired. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not obligated to wait or read signs forever. But if you truly want to understand this pattern, you have to decode his behavior, not just judge it. He's not trying to be cold. He's trying to survive closeness. And that's a man in conflict with himself. Because as much as he wants to keep his walls up, he knows that those same walls are keeping you out. And that eats at him more than he'll ever admit. So next time he shows up with logic instead of love, don't assume he doesn't care. Realize he's showing up in the only language he feels safe using right now. You can hold your boundary, and you should. But never forget what it means when he starts showing up with small talk and no emotional ask. An avoidant man who starts speaking logically is trying to keep his heart close while pretending he's still in control. The truth, he's not. His mind may be speaking reason, but his soul is quietly begging to be seen. And now we come to one of the most misunderstood signals of all, his silence. Most people assume silence means indifference. They say, if he cared, he'd call. If he missed me, he'd say it. And that logic might apply to someone secure, someone emotionally fluent. But with an avoidant man, that logic breaks down. It completely fails to decode the reality of what's going on beneath the surface. Because with him, silence isn't peace. Silence is panic. It's obsession. It's emotional overwhelm disguised as withdrawal. When an avoidant starts falling hard, he doesn't get louder, he gets quieter. But not because he's done with you. It's because he doesn't know what to do with what he feels for you. Understand this. He's not emotionally absent, he's emotionally flooded. There's a storm in his head he's never had the tools to manage. You've triggered something deeper than just attraction. You've hit a nerve he spent years guarding, the fear of being close and the terror of losing someone once he is close. And now he's caught in a loop. He wants you near, but closeness feels unsafe, so he pulls away. But the distance only makes him miss you more, and that emotional pressure builds until it becomes unbearable. But now instead of reaching out, he collapses inward. He starts shutting down because staying silent feels like the only way to maintain any control over his internal chaos. That's not rejection, that's regulation. It's how he breathed through a situation that threatens the very identity he's built around not needing anyone. Because the truth is, avoidants fear being dependent. They fear losing autonomy, losing emotional control, losing themselves in the fire of connection, and falling for you, really falling, has exposed the lie they told themselves. I don't need love. You cracked the code. You triggered the very thing he thought he buried. And now, instead of confronting that, he vanishes, hoping time or silence will drown it out. But it doesn't. In fact, the more silent he becomes, the louder the emotions echo inside him. He's thinking about you constantly, replaying moments, analyzing everything. What he said, what you said, what he should have said. It's mental warfare, and he's losing. But here's what makes it worse. He can't talk about it. Vulnerability for him is foreign. It's like giving a sword to someone who's never been trained to use it. It feels dangerous. So instead of asking, do you still think about me? He disappears. Instead of saying, I miss you, he hopes you'll say it first. And if you don't, he spirals deeper into silence, further into this belief that maybe you've moved on, and maybe he deserves that. You see, for the avoidant, silence is a survival tactic. But emotionally, it's a breakdown. It's the collapse of the wall he once built with pride. And now he's stuck between wanting to be close and fearing what closeness might cost him. That's the war inside. A war between the comfort of distance and the agony of wanting more. And if you're the one on the receiving end of that silence, don't misread it as a lack of care. Read it for what it is. A man caught in the paradox of his own wiring. You didn't fail him. He doesn't know how to succeed at intimacy yet. That's not your responsibility to fix, but it is your power to understand. When his silence gets louder, it's not because he's forgotten you, it's because remembering you has become too much to handle. Here's where the confusion really starts to mess with your head. Just when you start thinking he's over you, when the silence is stretching, when the distance feels permanent, he starts watching you, not openly, not with words, but with eyes that never left. He starts lurking, viewing your stories, reacting without reacting, watching from behind the screen, quietly, methodically, as if trying to absorb your energy without getting burned. And you're left wondering, why is he still watching me if he doesn't want me? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what does this passive presence actually mean in the avoidant psyche? Because I'll tell you this straight, avoidant men don't move on in the way you think. When they begin falling hard, and especially after they've pulled away, their first instinct isn't to forget. It's to monitor. Why? Because watching you from afar allows them to stay emotionally connected while maintaining psychological safety. It gives them the illusion of control. Think about that. They still get to feel you. They still get to see what you're doing, who you're becoming, who you might be seeing, but without risking exposure, without having to show up vulnerable, without needing to actually engage. This is emotional voyeurism, a way of staying close to the flame without having to admit they missed the fire. Now, if you interpret that as disinterest, you're missing the psychological depth of the moment. He's not watching you because he's indifferent. He's watching you because his mind can't let go. And this is what makes the avoidance style so maddening. They emotionally retreat, but cognitively obsess. The space doesn't create relief, it creates fixation. And it's not just curiosity, it's emotional longing that has no outlet. Avoidants suppress their emotions, yes, but they do it at a cost. Every glance at your profile, every viewed story, every random late night scroll, it's not random, it's residue. It's the subconscious mind isn't ready to admit, I still care, and I don't know what to do with that. You need to understand the philosophical depth of this dynamic. At its core, this isn't just about relationships, it's about a man wrestling with his own nature. He's confronting the reality that the very strategies that once protected him, detachment, distance, self-containment, are now the very things sabotaging the thing he wants most, emotional closeness. Watching you from afar is his compromise. Feel all to yourself. That's how he gets to feel you without confronting his own emotional evolution. And if you think you're the only one who replays old conversations, you're not. He's doing it too, but he's doing it silently behind that screen, hoping you'll post something he can decode, looking for proof that the door isn't completely shut. He'll never say it, but he wants to know if your heart still leans in his direction. So when he starts watching you more closely, more frequently, more consistently, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's meaningless. For an avoidant, observation is confession. It's his way of saying, I can't be near you, but I can't walk away from you either. That's not peace, that's torment. When an avoidant man starts watching you silently, it means the distance didn't bring him freedom, it only exposed how deeply he still feels your presence. Let's talk about the contradiction that breaks most women emotionally, and it's this. He disappears, and then randomly pops up with a vague message. Hey, how have you been? Just thinking about you. No apology, no accountability, no real clarity, and you're left stunned, not because he reached out, but because he said so little with so much weight behind it. You're wondering, why now? Why this? What does he want? Here's the truth, and it's deeper than most people want to admit. When an avoidant man starts falling hard, really hard, he often reappears in your life, not because he's ready to be close, but because he can't stand the silence anymore. That's how emotional intensity works for him. He doesn't build closeness through consistent emotional engagement. He builds it through distance and then punctures that distance just enough to relieve the internal pressure without losing control. And that random message, that's a release valve. He's not reaching out with the intention to reconnect fully. He's reaching out to soothe himself, to make sure you're still emotionally available, to confirm that you haven't completely left his orbit. It's not malicious, it's reactive. It's fear trying to disguise itself as casual. See, in his mind, vulnerability feels like handing over a weapon. So instead of saying, I miss you, I'm struggling, I don't know how to close this gap, he sends the smallest breadcrumb possible and watches what you do with it. That one text is his version of emotional exposure, and it terrifies him. He doesn't want to be ignored, but he also doesn't want to be pulled into a depth he's still not ready to handle. Now here's the philosophical tension. He craves connection, but fears dependence. And in that tug of war, he sends mixed signals that confuse the hell out of you. You want clarity, he gives you ambiguity. You want presence, he gives you glimpses. And yet those glimpses, as small as they are, mean something significant in the avoidant mind. They mean he's thinking, he's feeling, he's circling. Because for him, reinitiating contact isn't just about you, it's about managing the psychological chaos inside. It's about reestablishing a thread to the one person who triggered feelings he never expected to confront. And what's crazy is, sometimes he doesn't even fully understand why he's reaching out. He just knows the silence has become unbearable. The emotional absence is no longer a relief, it's a wound. But here's the catch, and this is critical. If you respond with expectation, if you meet his breadcrumb with a full-course emotional meal, he often recoils. Not because he doesn't care, but because now the emotional weight is back in his lap, and he still hasn't developed the emotional muscles to carry it. This is why emotional intelligence is so vital here. If you recognize that his message isn't a full comeback, but rather a crack in the armor, you can stay grounded. You don't chase, you don't punish, but you also don't collapse into hope. You hold your power while recognizing the moment for what it is. A man fighting the gravity of feelings he doesn't yet know how to land. And that's the internal battle of the avoidant when he starts falling. He wants to connect, but he's terrified of what it will cost. So instead of coming all the way back, he taps on the door and runs. He reaches out in code, hoping you'll translate it into comfort, but without demanding vulnerability in return. When an avoidant man breaks the silence with breadcrumbs, it's not weakness, it's evidence of an emotional war he's quietly losing. And now we come to the final, most revealing behavior of all. The moment he tries to act like you never mattered. The moment he puts on a show of indifference so polished, so emotionally detached, it almost convinces you he's genuinely over it, that he never cared, that he's moved on clean, cold, and unscathed. But don't be fooled, because this is the ultimate defense mechanism of the avoidant man when he's falling harder than he ever expected. See, when an avoidant attachment style starts unraveling, when the feelings get too intense, when the vulnerability starts knocking at the door, what does he do? He doesn't face it, he suppresses it. He builds a wall, but this time he decorates it. He doesn't just go silent, he tries to rebrand the entire experience. He rewrites the narrative in his own head to maintain emotional distance. She was too much, I just needed space. We weren't that serious anyway. That's not truth. That's self-protection masquerading as emotional clarity. Because here's the brutal irony. The more intensely an avoidant man falls, the more he has to convince himself that he didn't. He starts hiding behind logic, behind excuses, behind false confidence, because he has no tools to process emotional intensity. His entire psychological framework was built on not needing anyone. And now that someone, you, has made him feel more than he planned to, The only way to stay in control is to pretend it didn't happen. But pretending isn't forgetting. Faking indifference doesn't erase emotional attachment. It just forces it deeper underground. So while he's out there curating a version of himself that looks detached, strong, unfazed, inside he's fragmented. He's not at peace. He's in emotional exile. He pushed away the very thing that awakened him, and now he has to sit with the silence and the self-inflicted loss. You have to understand the psychology here. For the avoidant, detachment is identity. It's how he survived emotional terrain his nervous system was never taught to navigate. He learned early that closeness equals danger, that love equals loss, that if you care too much, you lose control. So now, even when he's met with a love that is safe, steady, and real, his nervous system still defaults to sabotage, and that's the trap. He'll act like he's fine, but watch closely. He'll become more performative, not less, more curated, more selective. He might start posting more, laughing louder, socializing harder. But that's not freedom, that's theater. Because when someone is truly over you, they don't need to prove anything. But when they're not, they'll do everything to maintain the illusion of power, even if that illusion costs them real connection. So don't misread the mask. Don't internalize his avoidance as your failure. This is his emotional ceiling, not your emotional worth. And in many ways, that coldness is confirmation. Confirmation that you stirred something so deep, so raw, that the only way he could cope was to bury it under performance. But don't chase it, don't try to crack through it. That's not your role anymore. Your power lies in seeing it for what it is and choosing to rise above the illusion. Because while he's busy pretending you never mattered, the truth is you mattered so much he couldn't face it. When an avoidant man starts pretending you meant nothing, it's because you meant everything. And now he's trapped in the shadow of the very feelings he tried to escape.